we had gone through the who am I in terms of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And last week we did what? Like, what is bhakti? What is our position in relation to bhakti? And tonight we wanted to discuss where and when. So, where normally refers to the nature of our consciousness and where our consciousness is situated. And when refers to time and its influence or lack of influence on the soul. So when we speak about especially where we come from, if you ask, of course, 9 out of 10 people, they will give you their physical definition that I've come from this particular state, I am born to this particular family, I was born in this particular social status. So all the where questions relate to the material body. Of course, we talked about in the very first class that we're not just a material body. Therefore, when we speak about where in relation to the soul, what is the import of that? So where does the soul come from? So first, when we speak in parlance like where, there is some time which is imposed on that, or some historical context which is imposed on it, because saying where have you come from indicates that you were somewhere previously and then you came into existence, you came from that place to wherever you are. But when we say where does the soul come from, it's an ontological description. Why? Because the soul's existence is eternal. So you cannot have a where question in terms of historical context if the soul is eternal, because that means it was always existing. So there is no historical context to where. Where were you and now how you've come here? So where is not really the question of the soul in a historical sense, but ontologically you can ask. Ontologically means we can ask what is the origin of the soul, ontologically speaking, means the nature or the science of where the soul comes from. So when we ask that question, of course, the answer is Mamam Vamso, Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhutta Sanatana. So this is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the main spiritual resources in Bhakti Yoga. And there it says, Mama Angsa. So Krishna himself, or God himself, is saying that all the souls are Mama Angsa. It means they are his own parts. And of course, God is also eternal. We recognize the eternality of God. So he's saying here, though, Mamam Vamso, Jiva Loke. So all of the jivas, the word Jiva Lok means all the different jivas. So we have to get a little more detailed here, because the word jiva refers to an energy. Sometimes it's used in common parlance to refer to the individual as well, but technically jiva is a shakti, or an energy, or a power of God. So he's saying, Mamam Vamso, Jiva Lok, all of the energy which is manifest from me in the category called jiva has originated from me. Therefore, it is my angsa, it is my part. These jivas are individually called Atma. So the Atma is the Sanskrit word for soul. So all these individual souls or Atmas have come from the Jiva Shakti. That Jiva Shakti has its origin from God. You understand? And God is eternal. His Shakti is also eternal. So he says, Jiva Bhutta Sanatana. Mamamamso Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhutta Sanatana. That the Sanatana means eternal. That these parts of my energy, they're eternal manifestation. So where they came from ontologically is God, but they didn't have a historical non-existence, right? So this is called the Jiva Shakti. That Jiva Shakti of God has manifestation throughout all of the other expansions of the energy of God. So principally, there are 3 main expansions of God's energy: internal, marginal, and external. So the internal energy means the spiritual realm. So we could apply the question as well, where is the spiritual realm? Understand? We could say, where is it? What would be the answer if somebody asked, where is the spiritual realm?
In a sense, everywhere.
Everywhere. It's all pervasive. So when we speak about where in relation to spirituality, we're talking about where is the ability to perceive. So we're talking about a state of consciousness. So the state of consciousness determines the ability to perceive the where question in terms of the soul and the spiritual realm and the spiritual energy. The marginal energy means a position where Krishna's energy has a position in between the external energy and the internal energy. So the Jiva Shakti, or the power of coming from God, which is the Jiva, which we just talked about, that energy can be situated either in a marginal position or in an internal position. It can never truly be in the external reality. Just like oil and water don't mix, the Jiva Shakti energy can never become material. But that Jiva Shakti energy, being a manifestation of the energy of God, can become one with the spiritual energy. So there's the internal energy, the marginal energy, which is Jiva Shakti. The external energy is composed of what we talked about in the first class: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Mind, intelligence, and false ego are the basic elements. Then there's 23 altogether, 24 if you count the soul itself, 24 different material elements. You understand? So that is all constituting the external energy of God. Now, a question can be the when question. What is the influence of time in regards to this? So in regards to the spiritual energy, what is the position of time in relation to that? Does anybody want to take a guess at that?
Eternal?
It is eternal. So time in the spiritual world, does it have the influence in the spiritual arena to influence or control past, present, and future as it does in the material arena? Answer is no. So time may exist as a part of the Leela Shakti. Leela Shakti means the way that God performs his pastimes in the spiritual arena. So time can come as a agency of stimulation to pastimes, but it has no influence. Therefore, the bodies of these spiritual inhabitants do not become influenced by time and therefore grow old. You understand? Whereas in the material arena, time can exert an influence. And therefore, we have past, present, and future, and we have the experience of the function of that time energy on the body, creating it becoming older and older and older, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, time becomes the mechanism by which the body becomes completely unusable by the soul, and we have to give up one body to accept another one. So all of that is the influence of time, but only in the material arena. So in Sanskrit, it has two names. The internal energy, it is called Nitya, means eternal. Vartman means present, Kal. So eternally present time. So in the spiritual world, time is not thought of as a past, present, and future. It's manifest as an eternal present, and only for the sake of pastimes or lila does there become experience of something done yesterday or something to do tomorrow. And there's no actual influence on the bodies of the spiritually accomplished jiva souls. So time doesn't make their bodies grow older, obviously has no influence on the body of God himself, Krishna, like this. In the external arena, in the material world, time exerts the influence, as I mentioned, of past, present, and future, and causes an effect on the material bodies to grow old. Now, is that same effect being manifest on the soul itself?
No.
No. Therefore, the soul does not undergo what's called vikara, transformation. The soul is not growing old. The energy of earth, water, fire, and ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, which is the body, the composition of the external energy, that is changing by the influence of time. But the soul is situated beyond that, and the soul is not changing. But when the soul identifies, when the soul gives identification with the material body, it goes through the vicarious experience of I'm growing old. And it identifies with all of the activities and situations of the body getting old. And even at the time of death, it identifies with the temporal arrangement that's there, that the body is going to end, and so forth and so on. So the where and when questions regarding the nature of the soul are like this. What about the where and when of bhakti? Where does bhakti come from? And when does it come? In fact, we already described the where of the soul, but when does the soul, right? We already described it's eternal, but when does the soul come into this material energy? When does that happen? Anybody?
Trick question.
Genuine question. When does the soul come in contact with the material energy?
Since time
I guess-
immemorial.
Since time immemorial. In other words, this is called anadikal. Anadikal, anadi means no beginning. So the sojourn of the soul in the material world has no beginning. This is expressed in Srimad Bhagavatam, another ancient writing, and it's expressed there, anadi avidya yuktasha purushasha vedatmanam. The Purusha, the individual jiva souls, they have been from anadikal. Yukta means connected with the material energy. Big problem, red flags, buzzers. If there is an eternal spiritual realm in which there are also individual souls of Jiva Shakti who are eternally manifest in the internal energy and never come into the material energy, what is the cause of the ones who do manifest here? What is the cause of that? That becomes the next question. What is the cause of those jivas existing from time without any beginning? And when you say time without any beginning, you mean there was no causation really. Because what would have been the cause? Is everybody following the thought pattern? Where would have been if you've been in the material energy associated with it, not in it, but associated with it from time without any beginning, what was the cause of being in the material energy?
Wanting to lord over?
So the question would be that if the soul is eternal, where did the tendency to lord over come from?
It's always been there.
But then
No.
that would be to say that the soul, in and of its own nature, has these qualities in it. But all the scriptures say the soul by its very nature is Sat, Chit, and Ananda. It's pure.
Okay.
Isn't
Here's
it
some
because
puzzles to
we
be
have
reconciled.
some of the similar qualities as Krishna?
To establish our relationship with the Lord.
That's getting closer. That's getting closer. So let me go ahead and explain it. So the Jiva souls who are in the material world and who've been here from Anadi Kal, it is not due to any causation on their part. The existence of the Jiva souls in the material arena is also one pastime of Bhagavan. You understand? In other words, just like Krishna has leelas within the spiritual arena, there are leelas that are performed within the material arena. There are unlimited incarnations of Bhagavan, including the original form of Bhagavan himself, or Swayam Bhagavan Shri Krishna, also performs leelas here. Because this is a leela of Krishna, the use of his energy in form of Jiva Shakti, he also manifests that energy here. The Jiva Shakti that's manifest here is void of the internal spiritual potency that illumines their consciousness in terms of identifying their own spiritual nature, identifying God, identifying the spiritual realm, etc. So the next question is, why would he make an arrangement like that? Right, I mentioned, I think in one class, I wasn't sure if it's in our series here, there's a study in universities called theodicy. Theodicy means the study of why God would do things accordingly, like why do bad things happen to good people sort of thing. So why would God put us in this condition where, as Gunga Didi said, we're trying to lord it over, but the result of trying to lord it over is that we're suffering. You understand? Why would he make an arrangement like that? I want you to think about something. This is mentioned also in Jaiva Dharma, chapter 16. So when it comes to the writing part of this, I'm going to edit some of this out of there, because some of this is just for devotees, some is for the Bhakti Basics book, right? But in Jaiva Dharma is a very deep explanation. One is that when one truly wants to serve someone in love, do you tend to undergo inconveniences for the service in that love, even in the material world? Do we accept inconvenience to serve someone in love?
Yes.
Does sometime a husband or a wife stand over a very hot stove in the burning summertime to cook for that spouse?
Yes.
Especially when it comes to taking care of children out of parental affection, do we tolerate everything from the early stages of passing stool and urine on your own body to dealing with their teenage years to everything else in the name of love?
Yes.
Why suddenly when it comes to the absolute God who's been in the heart with us from time immemorial, it becomes difficult to reconcile that we're taking some inconvenience for the Leela that he performs in this world? But because of self-interest, we never think about that, because we put ourselves first in the comparison to us and God, but we don't do it when we think about those things which we consider to belong to us, our children, our spouses. Even to take care of this body, how much do people undergo trial and tribulation? To go to the gym now at 70 is a big deal, right? Everything aches, but to take care of this body, you go through all these different things. You go through so many inconveniences for self-interest, right? And we tolerate so many things for self-interest. But if you really thought about the depth of love and what love of God means, because this is also a Leela of Krishna's, it's called Srishti Leela, the creation Leela. And also Bhagavan performs many pastimes here. The pastimes that are performed in Vrindavan, when it manifests within the material arena, is very sweet and charming and even unique and has special features that are not there in the absolute spiritual realm, in the Aprakat Leela it's called, in the eternal Golok Dham. There are special pastimes here. So if Bhagavan wants to perform these pastimes here, and he maintains that some Jiva Shakti is here, and in order to accommodate the Jiva Shaktis being in this existence, they have to be void of their spiritual knowledge. Because if you're aware of your spiritual knowledge, then it makes you exit this Leela. So actually the absence of spiritual knowledge that's imbued in those who are in the material world is in part of Bhagavan's Leela. I say in part because part of that is also the training that takes place in this world of how to develop pure love and pure service towards Bhagavan to exist in the spiritual realm. So just like in one sense, if you looked at it in another way, when you go to university and you have to study, how many sleepless nights are there studying for exams? How much struggle is there if you're not from a very wealthy family to make sure you can pay tuitions and do all these things? You understand? So even in educating ourselves in this world, it requires some sacrifice and some struggle. What to speak to learn the proper mood of love and service to the highest divinity in the highest abode. So this is also a training place. So the inconveniences and so forth that go on here, if we thought about that in relationship to tolerating that in order to develop love for God, is that really a bad thing?
No.
From that perspective. From our own self-interest, it seems like there's discrimination. Why am I suffering? So now let's go back and deal with the suffering part. When you go to sleep at night, sometimes you have very, very bad dreams, right? Of course, I'm giving a secret here. If you will sandwich your day and your night with Hari Katha and so forth, it'll minimize bad dreams if you're having them. Understand? But sometimes you have very bad dreams. But when you wake up from that dream and you realize it was a dream, how much satisfaction and relief do you feel? The things that were happening in the dream, we have the perspective. It was a dream. In the same way, when we awaken our consciousness and our love for God, The material experience is looked at as a dream. Now, also compared to eternal time, because we mentioned when means time, compared to eternal time, even if we were in this world from Anadikal, how much is that in relation to eternal time? Nothing. The whole experience from Anadikal means time without any beginning, right, in this world. But if that sojourn comes to an end, and if you are taking up the process of bhakti, it is indicative that your sojourn in this world is coming to an end. There's actually directly a verse like that in Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhava Appabhaga, what is this? Bhava Appabhaga, Brahmato, Yaraj Bhavet, Janasha Tarahi Achyuta Sat Sangamaha. If you've come into the association, Achyuta Sat Sangamaha means of a sadhu, and you're hearing all these things, Bhav Appavaga Brahmato, and you've been wandering throughout all of the Brahmandas, you should understand, Bhav Appavaga. At this point that you're associating with a sadhu, it is like your 5-minute warning, your sojourn in the material world is over. This is a literal verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. If you come in contact with a sadhu and the practice of bhakti, that practice and that association itself is your 5-minute warning. Yep, it's over. It's getting ready to be over. If it's 1 life, 2 lives, or this life, this sojourn is over. The symptom are these things, the practice and the association of a sadhu. Bhavappavaga. Appavaga means liberated. Brahmato, from all of the travel and all the different Brahmandas. Yato bhavaj, certainly. Janasya tarahi achyuta satsangamaha. When any janasya means any person, tarahi, at the time, achyuta satsangama, they come in contact with sadhu sangha, it is the indication that their sojourn in the material world is over. Understand? So when you think about it, even if you look from Anadikal, but you compare that to eternal time, we've been here for a drop in the bucket, like the blinking of an eye. During that time, also the question will arise, did I actually suffer? When you wake up from your dream, what is your perspective on the suffering that took place in the dream? Did it actually happen or not? We immediately codify it. It was a dream.
You feel relieved.
You feel relieved. You immediately codify it. It was a dream. You understand? In the same way, when our spiritual consciousness wakes up, we realize I never actually suffered in the material world. Now, sometimes our acharyas use the perceived suffering as an impetus and inspiration to practice bhakti to get out of this consciousness. Gangadidi talked about the lording it over consciousness. To get you to break that, they utilize the results of lording it over, which is the perceived suffering, to get you to change your mindset. But in actuality, there's no suffering. Why? Because the soul itself also never has contact with the external energy. It's like oil and water. So where has the suffering come from? It is a vicarious arrangement of your emotionally identifying with the things you're seeing on your chitta. The chitta is like a flat screen TV or movie screen. The soul is situated in a spiritual position beyond that material energy and the flat screen TV. And it's looking at the flat screen TV. The modes of nature are playing out a drama according to your karma, which is the next discussion, right? Are playing out your karmic drama on the TV screen. You're watching it, and just like when you watch a movie, you're giving emotional investment to the plot, the characters. That means all the people you've met, family, friends, all your associates, the different dynamics going on according to the modes of nature. And you're riding an emotional roller coaster like watching a movie. Even when you watch a movie, when you turn the movie off at the end, whether it was a sad ending or happy ending, it was a movie. Bas, finished. Similarly, when you become spiritually awakened, the movie's turned off, and now the reality takes place. Because when you turn the TV off, or when you wake up from the dream, are you still in your real existence? Quote here, I'm saying relatively speaking. In the same way, when you wake up from the material karmic influences that have carried you from one material iteration to another, you wake up, it is that same feeling. It's described actually in Vedanta Sutra. In Vedanta Sutra, I think it's in the 4th chapter, it describes the consciousness when it shifts from the state of being conditioned to the state of being liberated, right? It describes that whole process. So when we wake up to our liberated state, we're experiencing ourselves, first of all, in eternal time. So there's no more imposition of prakat kal or material time. So we don't see there's any influence that we're changing. We don't see there's any influence that's coming from anything within the material energy, like sickness, old age, disease, or any of these things. We don't see any prospect of being reborn. In the liberated state, especially in the practice of bhakti, the spiritual identity is awarded at the perfectional stage. And therefore, your identity becomes completely associated with the awarded spiritual identity. And therefore, a person thinks there was never a time when I was not this particular Manjari servant of Radhika, or this particular Saka of Krishna, or this particular associate of Nanda and Yashoda serving Krishna and Vatsalya Ras. That identity manifests itself as eternally having existed. You understand? That's because time doesn't cross the border into the spiritual dimension. So when you transition by consciousness there, as Harinamananda Prabhu said in the beginning, you realize spiritual world is everywhere. And there is no past, present, or future. Everything is in eternal time. So my identity also in the spiritual world is in eternal time. So I've always been this Manjari, this Saka, etc., etc. Understand? Now, for those who take up other paths, not the path of bhakti, they may take up the path of yoga, or take up the path of gyan, or they may take up the path of karma. Karma means I'll do certain activities to create a better life for myself. By doing those kind of activities, you cannot even break the material plane and into the spiritual domain. You can elevate yourself to greater degrees of material enjoyment in the heavenly planets. So you could just think that most religious traditions are dominated by that theme, that they will act in a way that is spiritually correct, that will not incur bad karma, but will incur pious karma. The result of that is the reward they will receive by a greater level of material enjoyment within the heavenly spheres. So every single religious tradition, no matter what nomenclature they use, is describing the same thing. Enjoyment within the heavenly planets. But Shnei Punye Matcha Loka Vishanti. When the piety is exhausted and you have not really transitioned your consciousness into the spiritual domain, there's no other alternative but for you to come back to the place where you can again balance the scale. So you come back to the earthly realm from the heavenly planets. If you take up the path of Gyan or yoga, it allows you to break the material plane, but it doesn't establish you in your spiritual identity. It simply gives you freedom from the material plane. So you will realize that the Atma is eternal. The Atma has cognition of its eternality. And the Atma has bliss and no misery and no prospect of suffering. This is called Atma Ananda. So we're dealing with where and so forth now. This is the awareness of the soul. So we talked about the soul in material conditioning, the soul in the heavenly arena due to pious karma. And now we're talking about the soul breaking the material plane and being in its own nature, but not being established in bhakti or devotion or love towards God. Therefore, there's not a spiritual standing in relation to the personhood of God. But you've broken the material plane, and now you're existing beyond the influence of the modes of nature. And because of that, then the prospect for conditions which will arise to create misery is not there anymore, because you don't identify with anything within the material arena. So now, being just the soul of the Atma, Ananda is an intrinsic part of your existence. But our Goswamis have described this as dukkha pratiyogita. The word dukkha means misery. Pratiyoga means the opposite. So the very nature of the soul is the opposite of misery. So in the soul that has been realized by Gyan, then there is no misery, and one experiences the bliss of the absence of misery. You understand? Just like, there's no real mundane comparison, but if everything that you needed to have satisfied as far as your material life was concerned was taken care of tomorrow, you needed not worry about another bill, another health issue, anything else. The feeling of the resolution of all problems is itself a kind of bliss. So in Atmananda, that's what's happening. There's no influence of the material world, material time, or anything. So there's a sensibility of no misery whatsoever. It is called Atma Ananda. When one, through the process of yoga, goes even deeper and establishes a relationship with the atmosphere of the spiritual energy, the effulgence coming from the body of the personhood of God, it is called the Brahma Jyoti. That is the first perception of spiritual energy. And when one wants to increase their happiness, they may have realization of the spiritual energy itself beyond just their own existence, free from material energy. At that time, they make a link with the spiritual energy called Brahma Jyoti. That is called Sayuja Mukti, or liberation, by merging in the spiritual energy. This word merging is not the ideal explanation, even though it's used in common explanation. The Sanskrit word Sayuja literally means to exist along with the spiritual energy. You understand? So we're not merging into it. We're actually existing along with it. Because remember the statement we talked about from Bhagavad Gita, Jiva, Bhuta, Sanatana. Your individual status is eternal. That can never be given up. So now you're existing along with the spiritual energy, and it's called Sayuja. Sayuja literally means existing along with the spiritual energy, and having given up any material designation, one identifies with the Brahma Jyoti or Brahman, and they experience a happiness called Brahm Ananda. Everybody following so far? Brahmananda. The experience of Brahmananda, you want to ask the question?
Yes.
Woody?
Yeah. So when you merge, when you say merging into the Brahma Yoti, so you could be actually in this material body, but consciously merging into that atmosphere.
Exactly. That is called Jivan Mukta. Jivan Mukta means when you become realized, even in this body, that you're not the body, you are the soul. And then having realized the soul, you realize the happiness that comes from the spiritual effulgence coming from the Lord's body, and you associate with that. It's called Sayuja. Associating with that energy, it creates Brahmananda. Why? Because the qualities of Bhagavan are present to some slight degree in the effulgence coming from his body. In Bhagavad Gita, there's the statement, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. So that effulgence, which is emanating from the body of the Lord, which is experienced as the illumination of the spiritual energy, having association with that gives rise to a happiness based on the qualities inherent in that Brahma Jyoti, which are beyond the simple qualities which are manifest in the Atma, even when the Atma is free from the material influence. Now, when one picks up the practice of bhakti, then the origin of that Brahma Jyoti and the qualities to increase bliss that are inherent in that Brahma Jyoti manifest its persona. The first persona that is manifest is the Paramatma. Understand? The Paramatma means the super soul in the heart. So when one wants to experience what is the persona from which the qualities I'm experiencing is coming from, who is the persona? What is the origin of that? When my consciousness expands further, then the Paramatma manifests and reveals itself. This is the source of that Brahman, effulgence, etc., etc. You understand? Now, as soon as you discover personhood, you discover relational dynamics. With the Brahma Jyoti, there's no need of relational dynamics. It's an energy. You can appreciate it. I'm giving an example. If you see a painting, or you hear a record or recording, you can identify and appreciate the sound in the recording or the artistry in the visual dynamics of a painting. Is that not different from meeting the artist, the musician? Because a relational dynamic comes. So it's not only what they've manifested as an energy, but it's their persona which has come into play now. So we think, oh, wow, so nice to meet you. Wow, your painting is wonderful. Your song is wonderful. So now that the energy they manifested and their persona become one form of mutual admiration, but now there's personal dynamics involved, so it creates a relation. So when there's the realization of the persona of Bhagavan, it creates the relation known as Santarasa. Santa means a mutual admiration for seeing the personhood of God. There's no active mood of how I want to interact, but just seeing God has increased the bliss of Brahmananda to a whole new height. Because I found the source of the qualities of happiness in Brahman, I found the persona of that. So an admiration of that takes place. Just like for many people, if you see, let's keep the same simile we just had, you see finally the artist who is the personal source of the recording or artwork that you've seen. But you're seeing them at a distance. They're leaving their hotel or the art show, whatever it might be, and you're seeing them. No relational dynamic beyond admiration is taking place, but you're looking at them and, oh my gosh, yeah, there they are. Here's that person, there's that person. You haven't even spoken to them. But an admiration has taken place and it's created a relational dynamic called Santa. Shanta means a admiration that has not been activated into a state of relational dynamics in terms of service. You understand? You haven't created a service relationship, just one of admiration. That's what happens when a person experiences Paramatma. Now, in the contemplation of the glories of what is experienced by the persona of God in the form of Paramatma, a person begins to think and meditate on those qualities. By meditating on the qualities that are existing in that personhood, one desires, how can I be closer? This engenders the mood of service. The first mood of service that's engendered in the heart is called dasyaras. One thinks the object which I'm looking at is worshipable. I want to serve that worshipable objective. That is called dasyaras. Understand? When in serving that person, a sense of intimacy where the status of the opulence and power of that object of worship becomes more dominated by an intimate feeling of a desire to render service in more of a developed love, then that dasarasa turns into a mood of fraternity towards God. It is called sakyarasa. You understand? So on the last class, we'll go into more detail about that. I'm just giving you an overview because we're speaking about the nature of the where. The material energy, where is the spiritual energy? It's everywhere. How is it discovered by consciousness? That's led to the discussion we're having now. So then gradually, the elevation of the love takes place to a higher and higher degree, and it culminates in the mood of conjugal lover and beloved. That is what is the particular line of bhakti yoga that's been expressed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and given to us in the great fortune that we have to be born at this time, right? So it's not that everybody will experience that level. It will depend on many factors, which we'll discuss in the how and why section, right? But now we're just talking about where, so where things are located. So the soul's activities can be located either in the material world or in the spiritual world. Again, I'm reiterating, in the material world, their activities come under time and karma. Because also we have the discussion of where has the particular individual souls come from. And we say, well, they've been here from Anadi Kal, so they're eternal. Or what is the basis of the differentiation that we see between one Atma or one soul and another in their material karmic iterations? What's causing that? I guess I just gave the hint of what it is. It's a karmic iteration. So what is karma? Karma means that all of the actions that we perform produce a reaction. Those reactions play themselves out in 4 different ways.
Oh.
You had a question, Virginia?
I was trying to answer the question, what is karma?
Oh,
But my
Our
computer stopped.
internet is not
It goes in
working
and out.
too well.
okay.
Sorry.
Karma literally is actions that produce reactions according to the nature of the actions themselves. And it produces those reactions in a 4-fold manner. So first there's the action itself. That action registers as, 1, a result that has to manifest at some point. It's not manifest immediately. That karma is called aparabdha karma. It means an action that's not yet borne its fruit, but it's lying in wait to bear that fruit. Is that dependent on happening in one life, or can it extend beyond one life and go into another? Yes, I see everybody shaking their head. So it can extend beyond one life and go into another. That's where you see the variety of different people's karmic portfolios that are as individual as their DNA. Because your karma is as unique as your DNA. In fact, your DNA is karmic. You understand? So what happens is, aparabdha means those actions which will bear fruit in this life later on, or even going into another life. It also sets up what is called kut. Kut means a tendency to do the same actions, because when you do something, you create a connection with what that thing is you're doing. So there'll be a tendency to repeat it. And this is the problem, because even if the action is sinful and it's producing vikarma or bad karma, the attachment to the quote enjoyment that was derived from that action will make you repeat it. And it creates a cycle. And then the aparabdha, the unborn fruit of that thing will manifest again and again and again. And that's why people have so many different kinds of problems. Now, besides manifesting the kut, or the tendency to recommit that activity, it not only creates a seed of a further action in that same domain, whether it's good or bad, etc. And that seed is called a bij, which then will manifest as a desire. The kut is the general tendency, but the bij is the desire that comes in your mind. Yeah, we should do this thing. Whether it's good or bad, we should do this again. You understand? Because everybody will rationalize. This is what the intelligence does. If it's a good activity, the intelligence will rationalize. This is good. This is proper. What is the problem? Why should we not do this? If it's bad, the tendency will be to rationalize it by, you only live once. What can you do? I mean, you got to enjoy it. I work really hard. You understand? So that rationale comes as a bij, as a seed. And then the seed becomes nourished and fructified when you act on it. Again, that creates aparabdha karma. Then when you have to be responsible for the result of that action, it is called parabdha karma. When I got sick, when I had the accident, when this thing happened, that thing happened, that is called parabdha karma. It is the fruit now born from those earlier actions. When we take birth in this world, every soul is manifesting their birth as parabdha karma. Therefore, if a person is born wealthy, healthy, and happy, or with some particular disease or other inauspicious thing, that is karma playing itself out. That is not an evil hand of God deciding to be discriminatory and make one person one way and another person another way. This is actually their own actions which are manifesting in the next iteration. Then the actions they perform in the current iteration is creating the future. Last week we discussed, however, that there is something called akarmic activity, because the nature of the soul is that it is active. It can't be inactive. You understand? So it expresses activity in the physical body, in the subtle body when you dream, and even when you transition to a new body, it's also expressing action. So there's no time when the soul is not active. So, but you can't act in such a way that you don't produce these different degrees of karmic reactions. It is called akarma. How? When all of your actions are dedicated to the spiritual reality, it does not create karma because the activities there only geared towards your soul and its relationship to God, and according to what I described earlier, either by becoming free from the material world, merging with Brahman, realizing the super soul, or eventually realizing the higher persona of God in the form of Krishna, etc., etc. So those activities that are spiritual don't produce karma that would bring you back into the material arena. So those activities are also not under time. Because the next question is, when will I get my spiritual attainment? You understand? Because when I signed up to go to college, I knew it was a 4-year degree program. And if I took all the courses that were laid out by the office when you go and you do your counseling and you set up your courses, if I do these many courses with these many hours in this period of time in the school season, and then I decide to go to summer school, I'll graduate. You can calculate it all. Can you do that with your spiritual unfoldment? No. Because is your perfection in your spiritual unfoldment dependent on you, or is it dependent on the mercy of God? You understand? So this is why this is set up like this, is because it engenders the mood, which is the first step in love, which is called being surrendered. Giving over control that you thought you had in your material dealings, realizing I'm not the controller. And giving over control in the ultimate sense to the very object of your worship. Therefore, I'm placing everything in the hands of God. I will do everything necessary in terms of spiritual activity. I won't create further karmic activities in the material sense. But I realize no matter what I do, ultimately everything will be on the mercy of God as to when that perfection will take place. Now, if God doesn't work on it within 3 months, should I have doubts? You understand? Listen, I've been doing everything for 3 months straight, day and night, every single thing. So I don't know what's happening. Now, I know it's not my fault because I've been up on Mangal Arti every day, same time, same place. I'm chanting 64 rounds, not 16. So I don't know what's going on. We probably need to check the system. I'm being facetious now, right? But something's not right. You understand? And it's this one thing. One of our chief spiritual mentors, Rupa Goswami, he wrote, you should have utsahan. It means the constant desire, enlivened desire to perform the spiritual practice, which leads towards love of God. Secondly, utsahan nishchayad. Nishchayad means you should have a conviction that yes, God will come through. It will happen. And dariyat means patience, that I will not try to be the controller as to when that takes place. Another reason for the surrender is that surrender is a great ingredient in love. The most greatest expression of love is also the greatest position of vulnerability in relation to the object of your love. Most people in material relationships, they keep a certain guardedness about the most inner recesses of their being, because I don't want to take the chance that I will be exploited, hurt, or anything else. So we have a sort of guardrail up about the most inner recesses. But in loving God, you cannot do that. So you have to literally give up everything. This is the meaning of surrender. The last line in the verse of surrender is Atmanikshepa Karpanya. Atmanikshepa means I'm giving up the most inner core of my being to the lotus feet of God and putting everything in the hands of God. And I'm doing everything unmotivated. Suppose God says, I'm not going to reward you. Would you keep doing your sadhan bhakti? Yes, because that means the love is unconditional. If you'll say, well, I got a telegram or text or something from somebody who said they were in Golok Vrindavan with Krishna, and he said, no, I'm not doing that for them. So they can keep doing the sadhana if they want to, but no, I'm not giving them liberation. I'm not giving them love of God. And then you said, oh, well, I'm not going to give love of God? All right, well, maybe I don't want to go back to the material world, but I don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning, that's for sure. You understand? So if the mentality, I'm not talking about the actual literal dynamic, I'm talking about the mentality. If the mentality is that I have to be rewarded for these activities. How is the love unconditional or unmotivated, or anya abilasita sunya? Means devoid of any other desire. So the activity of expressions of love have to be done regardless of the outcome. It's unconditioned. Now, the nature of God himself is he's expressed himself. Oh, if anybody will serve me, unconditionally like that, I will reciprocate. You understand? That's his own declaration. But are we dependent on that? So much so that Krishna said, listen, I'm not going to even say it. He tells Arjuna, you're a witness to the fact that I will come through. So, pratijani kunteya pratijani. You declare it. You tell everybody. You understand? Because you're the example of someone who has shown me unconditional love. And I've come through for you all the time. So to make them believe it, right, you speak it. Kunteya pratijani. You understand? So in this way, we should do our devotion, our karmic devotion towards Krishna, unmotivated, fully surrendered. And therefore, the issue of when will not become an obstacle for us. Why? Because as soon as you become absorbed in the lack of concern about when, where starts to manifest. Try to understand what I'm saying. As soon as you give up the tendency to control the outcome, when, the where, which means the spiritual domain you're searching for, immediately starts to manifest. Because the state of the soul in its unconditional love for Krishna is the spiritual world. Harinamananda said in the very beginning, it's not a geologistical arrangement. Yeah, I'm going to go back to Godhead. You see people look up in the air. I'm going to go back home, back to Godhead. Back to Godhead is everywhere. It's where your consciousness becomes situated. So the where is a matter of consciousness. The when is a matter of the reality of time's influence, either in the material arena or its lack of influence in the spiritual domain. So if you're truly doing bhajan sadhan, you're already situated in the spiritual arena. Now you just have to become aware of it, and time is not a factor. So when does it become a question? You understand? When does it really become a question? When you're doing deep sadhan bhajan life, because you're already situated in the spiritual paradigm. That's why Krishna gave the explanation in Bhagavad Gita. Pratyakshva gamam dharmyam susukam kartyam abhyayam. While you're practicing, gradually when you've entered into that internal space, then pratyakshva gamam, you're discovering yourself. And even in the stage we all are now, if you look right now, how much self-discovery has already taken place? That's why it's very difficult to give bhakti up. Even if Guru will tell you, no, you don't have to chant, just don't worry about anything, just don't worry about chanting it. Most devotees can't give it up. They can't. If you've never developed any real motive, then, oh, Gurudev told me no need to chant anything, I'm good. Bas. But even if Gurudev will tell a very deeply motivated and bhajan person, oh, Gurudev, I want to chant. I want to do my sadhan bhajan. Why? Because now, pratyakshvagamam, what you've been doing is given revelation to this point. And therefore, you've already crossed the boundary of time. Are you not in the spiritual arena right now? But we look at things, we always look at things in past, present, and future. So in the material arena, we tend not to operate in the present. So when we talk about obtaining our spiritual goal, we talk about, yes, when I become perfect. You understand? We start saying, when I become perfect. And then we start creating a metric within the material dynamic of what is perfect and so forth and so on. Right now, if you're doing sadhan bhajan, everything, is that not perfect right now? But we're creating things beyond by our imagination in relation to time when I become perfect. If you're doing sadhan bhajan right now, and you're fully endeavoring to your best capacity to serve Radha and Krishna, that is called perfection. That perfection simply becomes more revealed to you. You understand? So it's not a geo logistical accomplishment that happens. Yeah, I can see now I've moved into a different area. It's inner revelatory. That's the meaning of the word pratyakshvagamam damyam. Pratyaksh means to reveal something. So I'm already situated spiritually, already situated in a perfection according to my adhikar. And now what's happening is that adhikar, that position, is growing within perfection. So I'm already situated in eternal time, because who am I? Am I the body or the soul? If you know that, go out and ask, take a poll and go out and ask 10 people right now outside the door. See how many come back and say they're the soul. You already are situated in that position. And what's happening is now it's unfolding as you go on practicing and hearing. So you're already situated in perfection. It's unfolding the nature of that perfection. Pratyakshvagamam dharmyam. In the dharma you're doing, it's unfolding more and more. Therefore, su sukham. It is creating great happiness. Kartam, what you're doing, karta means what you're doing in a spiritual sense, is creating great happiness. That's why there's many other things you could be doing at 7 o'clock on a Thursday. But everybody's on here and we're trying to talk about these spiritual sciences and so forth and so on. There is a taste in it or you would not do it. You cannot force yourself to do something you have no taste in doing. When you really think about it, even if psychologists will say, no, people do it all the time. People go to work all the time. They hate their job, but they love their paycheck. You understand? But if you weren't getting paid, you wouldn't go. So there's always some taste in every endeavor, or you wouldn't do that thing. Understand? So this is very important to understand. So this is the where. Where refers to your consciousness. When refers to the dynamic of time. And the dynamic of time refers to your focus of your consciousness, either in the material arena, where time has an influence, or when you focus in the spiritual arena, where time does not have that influence. And where is a matter of your conscious positioning. When you're focused in your inner real consciousness, you're in the spiritual paradigm. And when you break that and go into the concentration of the body and the things related to the body, then you're giving conscious endeavor in the material arena. You understand? Now, the secret here, and this is what I'll end with, is to synthesize the two things. So the practice of sadhana bhakti is a synthesis of the external activities based on the fact we still have a body with the spiritual reality we are the soul. So sadhana bhakti is the synthesis of the material body we still have with the karmic activities of spiritual endeavor of the soul. You understand? So if you go to work every day, what is that work for? It's to help you maintain doing your sadhan bhajan. If you have children and you're raising your children, that is the duty of a parent related to your spiritual sadhan bhakti. You understand? So if you live in a home and you have your objects of worship, your deities, everything in that home, the home actually belongs to the deities and you're a sevak who lives there. So in this way, everything starts to become synthesized with the reality of my soul's activity. And my job, my career, everything else is not something separate in the material world. It is a part and parcel of the soul's activities, which is vastly different from the person who works every single day looking for how they'll take the fruit of the work and enjoy it themselves. You understand? And again, susukam karta avyamyam means it's not that I'm not enjoying in the position of the soul. So much bliss is coming internally and externally. Now I'm testifying, I've come to Cleveland. I've had prasadam in Cleveland. I was unhappy. No, this is overwhelmingly unhappiness or something. So no, realistically speaking, kirtan, prasad, association of Vaishnavas, harikatha, it's happiness or not. So there is a synthesis. It's not that the soul activities are all void of any kind of happiness. It's just like a tolerance until you die or something. Susukam kartam avayam. The kartam of spiritual life is also very happy. You understand? So just quickly in review, where refers to the nature of our consciousness and the situation of our consciousness. When refers to the dynamics of time. Eternally manifest present in the spiritual domain, or the influence of past, present, and future in the material domain, its particular influence according to our identification with the body or identification with the soul. All right, so maybe we'll take some questions here, and then I'll try to end timely. So any questions about anything, or anything that I should go over?
Haribol Dandavats.
Haribo, Didi.
Mukunda, when you mentioned about karma, and you were saying how when we have our spiritual practice, that this is absolutely not getting us, any bad karma or any, karma in the material world. But can you explain how to get, is there a process that we can also destroy or get rid of the bad karma that we've already incurred, along with chanting? Is there something else that we can also do to get rid of bad karma that we've already incurred?
No, because the process of bhakti itself is absolute and complete. When you take up the practice of bhakti and you do saranagati, the karmic wheel is compared to, Al Srila Prabhupada said, the unplugging of a fan. When you unplug the fan, the power source that created the gyrations of the fan is now gone. So what happens to the fan? The blades are still turning, but what happens? They start to slow down gradually because there's no power behind it. In the same way, the upper of the karma, which we had, means that karma which isn't borne fruit yet. Even though that karma will manifest, it will manifest in a weakened position. Just like everybody was a kid, don't judge me. We played the game of trying to stick your finger in the fan and touch the blades without getting cut, right? You tried to put the pad of your finger to just slow the blade down and hold it, and you can let it go and it would, right? So there's a difference between doing that, which is like the material energy and karma still being in full force, and when you unplug the fan and you start sticking your finger in, even if you stick your finger in a little bit, the fan almost comes to a halt. You understand? Because it's not powered anymore. Similarly, karma, whether it is pious karma or bad karma, has been unplugged from the karmic source, which is your activities in relation to the body. So now, whatever reactions do come, they tend to come in a weakened state. So whereas your karma may have said that your whole arm should be taken off, now you cut your finger. You understand? This is just a rough example.
No, yeah, I understand.
Comes, and that's why the verses there in Bhagavatam, Tate anukampam sushamikshmano, bunja eva atmakritam vipakam. We should tolerate that karma, thinking this is the mercy of the Lord.
That's why that's said that you
Yes,
should consider it mercy.
I should be getting so much worse based on what I've done over the course of lives, but by the mercy of God, then the reaction to what I've done, being his servant, has been minimized.
Oh, that's where that comes from. Okay, because I hear Sham has said that a number of times. He said, well, Chandrika, you should just consider it mercy. It could be worse. It could be worse. And then I say, how could you say something like that? That's so insensitive. But that's what you mean. Okay.
That's what's meant by that.
Okay.
Yep. Because karma is also a law of Bhagavans, right? The verse that describes karma, karmana daivana natrena janto tehopapatye, stri uttapravesta pungsam rekta kanarsaya. This verse in the third canto describes exactly what the karmic portfolio and package is. Karmana daivana natrena. According to our destiny, daiva means destiny, born from karmic activity. Karmana daivana natrena. It determines, karmana daivana natrena, janto devapatye. This combination of things determines stri uttapraveshta, what womb I will enter. And pumsam rekta kanasaya, what male person will be the generator of the particle of procreative fluid into that womb. That's in Bhagavatam. So it directly picks out who will be the father and the mother that gives facility to your next karmic iteration.
Wow.
So karma is that exact thing. But we don't only come into the world with our material karmas. We also come with the praktonic, means the samskars of bhakti or spiritual life in the previous life also. So they come on two separate tracks. And what happens is at a certain point, let's say your karmic package is going like this, and your bhakti samskars are going like this. At a certain age, at a certain period of time, it starts going like this, because the impulse, according to your bhakti samskars, start to take over. And all of a sudden they reach this point here, where they're kind of equal. That's when the question arises, wait a minute, there's got to be more than this material life. When those samskars come to that point, and they're matched up with the material samskars, then there's a question, because I'm getting two influences. And the one influence says, you know, there's something else to check out besides the material world. And your mind goes, yeah, it's got to be more than just this. And then you start checking out what that is. The previous bhakti samskars takes you back to the path of bhakti automatically. It doesn't take you to the channel of gyan and yoga, etc. You understand? So now you get back on the path of bhakti, and you get the right kind of association depending on your bhakti samskars. The bhakti samskars start going like this, and it causes the material impressions to start to wane.
Okay.
You understand?
I see. Okay. Therefore, you don't want to eat McDonald's anymore, and you don't
Exactly.
want
You don't want to go to
all
the
the-
club. You ain't willing to entertain the guy because he's cute, except for all that kind of stuff starts to dwindle. You understand?
Okay.
And everything in your life becomes intentional and substantive, because the dominance of the spiritual influences are pulling your consciousness towards the actual nature of your consciousness in bhakti, which is to serve and love God. So it's the actions of spiritual energy that's doing that.
I see. I see. Thank
Now,
you.
this is a deep thing too, because the material energy is also a serving energy of God. Maya Devi is actually a Shakti of God, Shakti of Radharani. So Maya will let you go proportionate to your footing in the spiritual impressions. You understand? Maya has a whole like this.
What
So
do you
according
mean?
to how you,
I was asking, can you explain that? What do you mean?
Yes. So let's say Maya's grip is like this. As your spiritual impressions begin to rise, Maya sees you have footing in the spiritual arena in a certain degree. The hold that she has comes like this. As your footing grows, it goes like this. When your footing is more complete, it goes like that. And when your footing is situated in the spiritual world, absolutely, she lets go completely.
I see.
Because the nature of the jiva energy is that it's dependent. It's dependent for shelter either within the material influence or the spiritual influence. So once the spiritual influence takes hold of you like this, the material energy no longer has to hold on, it lets go.
I see. I see. Thank you so much. Hari Hari Bol.
Any other questions?
I was going to say, and based on what you're saying here, when someone comes in touch with the sadhu guru, and then they start performing bhajan, then bhajan itself helps one to relieve oneself from all that material contamination. Is that a fact?
Yes, it's the Shakti in the bhajan. That's why you heard this word before, bhajana kriya. So the word kriya means the energy of God that is subsidizing and is present in the practice that's causing the removal of the unwanted things. Because we don't have the capacity ourselves to remove them. So we did, the part was, Saranagati or surrender has three elements. The first is called prapati. Prapati means I'm desiring to do it. I don't even have the power to surrender, but I desire to do it. Then the inspiration to do it is called Saranagati, which is the 6 things: doing what's favorable, staying away from what's unfavorable, understanding that Krishna is protecting you on the path of bhakti, and that Krishna is maintaining your growth in bhakti, is subsidizing the process for you, right? And then Atma Nikshep, right? means the tendency, I want to give my entire self over to Krishna completely. Karpanya means realizing my inability to do this myself. Karpanya means I become completely humble. This is the meaning of the Shishastakam class, Trenarapi Sunich. And then when the Saranagati in action is manifest by the subsidy of the Kriya Shakti coming from the practice, which is your invocation for that mercy, then when the practice and the mercy combine together in their goal, then it produces Atmanivedana. Atmanivedana means, just like the Shravan Kirtan Vishnu Smaran or the 9 process of Bhakti, the last one is Atmanivedana. So Atmanivedana means having realized my Atma as a cowherd boy, as a gopi, etc., etc. I'm giving that fully to Krishna for his enjoyment. So a body which is suitable to that mood is manifest. A gopi body, a cowherd boy body, whatever body is suitable to the service, that body is offered completely to Krishna for his enjoyment. So the bodies of the eternal associates is a manifestation of their desire to serve Krishna, and Krishna's energy, called Sandhini Shakti, is manifested in a body suitable to the kind of service they are rendering and Krishna's tasting. The bodies that we get in the material world are the combination of our desires to taste a certain kind of material phenomenon. You understand? So karma produces a body that's exactly according to what you deserve and desired in the previous life. Oh, so you want to enjoy like this? All right, I'm gonna give you a body like this, etc., etc., etc. But because the body's temporary, you wanted a body like Denzel Washington, but by the time you get older, the body is not quite like that. You understand? So that's the temporal nature of the material world. You understand? But the spiritual body is not like that. You desire the body of a Manjari to serve Shrimati Radhika. Oh, that body will be eternally 12 and a half to 13 years old. It will have all the features. They're called Ekadas Bhav. I'm not explaining that here. It's very high subject, right? But all those things will be manifest in your consciousness. You realize this is me. Yeah? All right, any last question? All right, Hari Bol. So another session. So next week, why we'll try to incorporate, but how is a pretty lengthy subject because it's about the process of bhakti. So we'll complete everything. So that'll be the completion of the bhakti basics, right? We'll edit all this stuff out because some things are, I'm speaking for devotees, some things I'm speaking for the book, right? And mess things up. So next week, the why and the how. And we'll see how much we get through. All right, my Dandavad Pranam devotees. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Vanchakapati Vishaki Pasapati Chapati Nagame Vaishnavi Vinoma. Jai Prabhuji. Any announcement? Harinamananda Parvati, any announcements?
Not necessarily, but there will be digital magazine coming out in this month. We're going to start. So if anyone does want to submit any articles at any point, just let me know and we can add it.
Yeah. One thing that might be very nice, especially now, is articles from devotees, because every devotee can do that, is how I came to bhakti. That might be a very good way to start because you get articles and it's interesting reading people's personal stories and so forth and so on. And the epiphanies, that's something that each person can contribute, you know? So that could be a section there. All right, Haribo. So anyway, I won't discuss that part here. I was going to discuss something else about the travel, but all the dates, we're going to keep the dates the same right now. So there's not going to be any changes and so forth and so on. So everything was worked out with Gita Nagri, and I understand may do something there also. So it honors, so there's no difficulty about anything like that. Yeah.
So Cleveland, as far as Columbus, we can just do Cleveland.
We'll just do Cleveland. So I'll come to Cleveland a day earlier than expected, which means I'll be in Cleveland on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Probably leave Monday afternoon. right? And then also I'm thinking while I'm in Cleveland, the Saturday afternoon, I will do the yagya for all of those who are taking initiation. And then Shambhala Prabhu is also taking Diksha, so he will come and I'll do the yagya. And for Radha, I'll maybe do the same thing in DC. Because you guys may not be in Cleveland, but I'll be in DC. And so I may have a chance also to do it there. All right, Dandavad Pranam, Hari Hari Bo. See everybody next week.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bo. On Sunday.